There's a moment when you realize the world isn't playing by the rules you were taught. When you discover that while you've been operating with honor, integrity, and good faith, others have been moving like chess masters 3 steps ahead. They smile to your face while positioning themselves behind your back. They agree with you publicly, then undermine you privately. They make you feel small without ever raising their voice. And suddenly, you understand why you've been losing battles you didn't even know you were fighting. Most people respond to this awakening with bitterness. They become cynical. They retreat into victimhood or lash out in anger. But there's a third option, one that the most successful and untouchable people throughout history have chosen. They don't become bitter. They become strategic. They don't just learn the game, they master it. And they build something around themselves that protects them from ever being caught off guard again. Mental armor, not the kind that makes you cold or cruel, but the kind that makes you unshakable. The kind that turns manipulation attempts into mere background noise. The kind that makes people think twice before they test you, because something in your energy tells them they won't like what they find. This isn't about becoming someone you're not. This is about becoming someone no one can touch. The brutal truth is this: in every interaction, someone is setting the frame. Someone is controlling the emotional temperature. Someone is deciding how much respect gets distributed and to whom. And if you're not consciously participating in that process, you're unconsciously submitting to it. You're letting others write the rules of engagement while you wonder why you keep losing. But what if you could reverse that dynamic completely? What if instead of being the one who gets tested, you became the one whose presence alone makes others test themselves? What if your silence carried more weight than their words? What if your calm became so unsettling that people started managing their behavior around you without you ever having to demand it? This is what mental armor looks like in practice. It's not aggression disguised as strength. It's strength so refined it doesn't need to announce itself. It's psychological positioning so precise that others feel compelled to treat you with respect before they consciously decide to. And once you understand how to build it, everything changes. Not just how others treat you, but how you move through the world entirely. The first pillar of mental armor is emotional invincibility. Not the absence of emotion, but complete sovereignty over when, how, and if you display it. Because here's what most people don't understand. Every emotional reaction is information. Every flinch reveals a button that can be pressed. Every defensive response teaches others exactly how to destabilize you next time. When someone insults you and you react, you've just handed them the blueprint for controlling your future behavior. But when someone insults you and you remain perfectly still, something shifts in the room. They expected anger, defensiveness, hurt. Instead, they get nothing. That nothing becomes everything, because now they can't read you. They can't predict you. They can't manipulate you. And what people can't control, they start to fear. Not the kind of fear that breeds resentment, but the kind that commands respect. This doesn't mean becoming emotionally dead. It means becoming emotionally selective. Your anger becomes a choice, not a reflex. Your hurt becomes private, not public. Your joy becomes genuine, not performed. When you control the display, you control the dynamic. When you control the dynamic, you control the outcome. The second pillar is strategic unpredictability. Most people are readable within minutes of meeting them. They reveal their triggers, their insecurities, their patterns, their limits. They become safe to disrespect because others know exactly how they'll respond. But unpredictability is a form of power that requires no force. When people can't predict your response, they default to caution. This isn't about being erratic or unstable. It's about being selectively inconsistent in ways that keep others slightly off balance. Sometimes you're warm, sometimes you're distant. Sometimes you engage, sometimes you observe. Sometimes you speak with authority, Sometimes you ask questions that make others question themselves. The common thread isn't randomness. It's that you never quite fit into the category they're trying to place you in. When someone can categorize you, they can strategize against you. When they can't, they spend their mental energy trying to figure you out instead of trying to manipulate you. And that shift in mental energy is where your advantage lives. They're playing defense while you're playing offense, except your offense looks like calm observation. The third pillar is social gravity. This is perhaps the most subtle but most powerful element of mental armor. It's the ability to make your presence felt, even in your absence. It's when people start factoring your potential reaction into their decisions before you even know those decisions are being made. It's when your name comes up in conversations you're not part of, not as gossip, but as a reference point. Social gravity isn't built through self-promotion or attention-seeking. It's built through consistent demonstration of certain qualities: reliability without desperation, competence without arrogance, boundaries without explanation, standards without compromise. Over time, these qualities compound into something people can feel but can't quite define. You become someone who matters without needing to prove it. When you have social gravity, people defer to you naturally. Not because you demand it, but because something about your energy suggests that crossing you would be unwise. They might not be able to articulate why, but they feel it. And that feeling changes how they speak to you, how they include you, how they consider you in their calculations. The fourth pillar is information asymmetry. While others broadcast their thoughts, feelings, plans, and reactions, you become selectively transparent. You reveal enough to maintain relationships, but never enough to be fully predictable. You ask more questions than you answer. You listen more than you speak. You observe more than you participate. This isn't about being secretive for the sake of mystery. It's about recognizing that information is leverage, and leverage is protection. When people know everything about you, they know exactly how to approach you, influence you, or, if necessary, undermine you. But when your inner world remains largely private, they have to guess. And people who are guessing are people who are being careful. You become someone others want to understand, but can't quite figure out. This creates a psychological pull where people find themselves thinking about you more than they think about others. Not because you're trying to be memorable, but because you're impossible to categorize completely. And what people think about frequently, they treat with respect. The fifth pillar is consequence without confrontation. This is where mental armor becomes truly protective. Instead of fighting battles, you simply remove yourself from wars that don't serve you. Instead of arguing with disrespect, you withdraw access. Instead of demanding better treatment, you make poor treatment expensive through your absence. When someone crosses a boundary, you don't explain why it's unacceptable. You don't threaten consequences. You simply implement them quietly. Your energy shifts. Your availability decreases. Your warmth becomes conditional. Not as punishment, but as natural cause and effect. Poor treatment results in less access to you. Good treatment results in more. This approach is devastatingly effective because it bypasses the entire drama cycle that most conflicts depend on. There's no argument to win, no emotional scene to control, no narrative to manage. There's just a simple reality. Treat you well, and your presence enriches their life. Treat you poorly, and your presence becomes scarce. The choice becomes entirely theirs, but the consequences are entirely consistent. Most people will adjust their behavior quickly when they realize that disrespecting you doesn't create drama. It creates distance, and that distance feels worse than any argument ever could. These 5 pillars work together to create something that goes beyond simple confidence or self-respect. They create an energy field around you that others can feel but can't quite define. An energy that says you're not someone to be tested casually, manipulated easily, or dismissed safely. Not because you're threatening, but because you're unshakable. But building mental armor isn't just about protection. It's about freedom. Freedom from the need to prove yourself in every interaction. Freedom from the anxiety of wondering what others think. Freedom from the exhaustion of managing everyone else's emotions while neglecting your own. When you have mental armor, you stop living in reaction mode and start living in creation mode. You stop asking permission and start taking position. But here's where most people stumble. They think mental armor means becoming closed off, cold, or antisocial. They confuse strength with rigidity. They mistake boundaries for walls. True mental armor isn't about shutting people out. It's about letting the right people in while keeping the wrong influences at a safe distance. It's selective, not absolute. The sixth pillar is calibrated warmth. Your kindness becomes intentional rather than automatic. Your generosity flows toward those who've earned it, not toward everyone who asks for it. Your emotional availability becomes a privilege that people qualify for through their behavior, not a public utility that anyone can access without consideration. This doesn't make you manipulative or calculating. It makes you wise. Because when your warmth is earned rather than assumed, it carries actual value. When your attention is selective rather than scattered, it becomes meaningful. When your energy is protected rather than freely given, it remains strong enough to actually help the people who deserve it. People will notice this shift immediately. Those who were taking advantage of your automatic kindness will complain that you've changed. They'll call you cold, distant, or different. And they're right. You have changed. You've evolved from someone who gives everything to everyone into someone who gives the right things to the right people at the right time. That's not coldness. That's wisdom in action. The seventh pillar is strategic silence. Not the silence of someone who has nothing to say, but the silence of someone who chooses their words with surgical precision. When everyone else is rushing to fill every pause, you become comfortable with empty space. When others are explaining themselves into weakness, you let your actions speak without commentary. This type of silence does something profound to group dynamics. It creates a vacuum that others feel compelled to fill. They start explaining themselves to you without you asking. They begin justifying their positions without you challenging them. They reveal their insecurities while trying to read your calm. Your silence becomes a mirror that reflects their inner state back at them, and most people don't like what they see. But strategic silence isn't about being antisocial or withdrawn. It's about understanding that words have power only when they're scarce. When you speak constantly, your words become background noise. When you speak selectively, every word lands with impact. People lean in when you talk because they know you don't waste their time with unnecessary commentary. The eighth pillar is emotional jujitsu. Instead of meeting force with force, you redirect energy. When someone tries to make you angry, you become curious about their need to provoke. When someone attempts to guilt you, you wonder aloud about their relationship with responsibility. When someone tests your boundaries, you make their testing behavior the subject of examination rather than defending the boundary itself. This approach is disarming because it's unexpected. Most people prepare for resistance when they push. They don't prepare for redirection. When you respond to aggression with calm analysis rather than defensive reaction, you shift the entire frame of the interaction. Suddenly they're explaining themselves instead of you defending yourself. The beauty of emotional jujitsu is that it requires no strength, only timing and positioning. You're not fighting their energy, you're using it. Their aggression becomes the fuel for their own exposure. Their manipulation attempts become evidence of their character. Their testing behavior becomes a demonstration of their insecurity. And you remain completely calm throughout because you're not opposing their force. You're channeling it. The ninth pillar is reputation management through consistency. Your mental armor isn't just about individual interactions. It's about the cumulative effect of how you show up across time. Every conversation, every boundary, every response contributes to a pattern that people begin to recognize and respect. When you consistently demonstrate that you won't be pushed around, people stop trying to push. When you consistently show that you don't engage in drama, people stop bringing drama to you. When you consistently prove that your standards aren't negotiable, people stop trying to negotiate them. Your reputation becomes your first line of defense because people self-select out of behaviors they know won't work with you. This consistency has to be genuine, not performed. People can sense the difference between someone who's trying to project strength and someone who actually possesses it. The projection creates effort and tension. The possession creates ease and flow. When your mental armor is authentic, maintaining it feels natural rather than exhausting. The 10th pillar is the power of selective engagement. Not every battle deserves your energy. Not every comment requires your response. Not every provocation needs your attention. Mental armor includes knowing when to engage and when to observe from a distance. When to speak and when to let silence do the work. When to correct and when to let people reveal themselves through their own words. This selectivity drives people crazy because they can't predict when you'll respond and when you won't. They can't figure out what gets your attention and what doesn't. This unpredictability keeps them focused on your reactions instead of their own agenda. They start performing for your approval instead of trying to diminish your position. When you master selective engagement, you realize that most conflicts are actually requests for attention. Most provocations are bids for reaction. Most testing is really asking whether you'll abandon your position to manage their emotions. When you don't take the bait, the person often reveals what they were really after. And usually it wasn't about the surface issue at all. The final element that ties all these pillars together is internal validation. Your mental armor is only as strong as your independence from external approval. When you need others to confirm your worth, you give them the power to diminish it. When you need others to validate your choices, you give them veto power over your decisions. When you need others to approve of your boundaries, you make those boundaries negotiable. But when your sense of self comes from within, when your standards are based on your own values rather than others' opinions, when your worth is determined by your own assessment rather than external feedback, you become unshakable. Not because you don't care what anyone thinks, but because you don't need anyone's permission to be who you are. This internal foundation makes every other pillar possible. You can be emotionally selective because you don't need everyone's approval. You can be strategically unpredictable because you don't need to be understood by everyone. You can maintain social gravity because you're not chasing social validation. You can control information because you're not desperate to be known completely. Mental armor isn't built overnight. It's constructed through thousands of small choices. The choice to stay calm when provoked. The choice to maintain boundaries when tested. The choice to remain consistent when others are chaotic. The choice to be selective when others are available to everyone. But once it's built, everything changes. You stop walking through life wondering when the next attack will come because you've made yourself unattackable. Not through aggression or isolation, but through a presence so composed, so grounded, so clearly defined, that others instinctively recalibrate their approach when they encounter you. People begin to speak differently around you. Not because you've demanded it, but because something in your energy suggests they should. They think twice before testing your boundaries, because your previous responses have taught them that testing you is unprofitable. They approach you with a subtle caution that feels like respect, even when they can't explain why. Your conversations become more meaningful because people know you don't waste time on surface-level nonsense. Your relationships deepen because the people who remain have proven they can handle your standards. Your professional interactions become more efficient because colleagues understand you operate from a position of strength, not need. But perhaps most importantly, you stop exhausting yourself trying to manage everyone else's behavior and emotions. You stop walking on eggshells around difficult people. You stop making excuses for those who consistently disrespect you. You stop sacrificing your peace to keep others comfortable. Instead, you become someone others adapt to rather than someone who constantly adapts to others. You become the fixed point in conversations while others adjust their tone and approach. You become the reference standard that people measure themselves against, rather than someone seeking validation from external standards. This isn't about becoming arrogant or disconnected. It's about becoming sovereign. It's about reaching a point where your inner state remains stable regardless of external chaos, where your sense of self stays intact even when others try to shake it, where your boundaries hold firm even when others test them repeatedly. When you've built true mental armor, you'll notice something profound. The same people who once tried to diminish you now seek your approval. The same individuals who tested your limits now respect them automatically. The same personalities who brought drama to your life now keep their chaos at a distance because they know you won't participate. And here's the most powerful part. You didn't have to become someone else to achieve this. You simply became the fullest, most protected version of who you already were. You didn't build walls. You built discernment. You didn't become cold. You became selective. You didn't shut people out. You started letting the right people in. The world will always contain people who operate through manipulation, intimidation, and emotional warfare. But with mental armor, they can't reach you. Their tactics bounce off your composure. Their provocations meet your silence. Their testing encounters your consistency. And eventually, they move on to easier targets because you've made yourself an unprofitable investment of their energy. This is how you stop being a victim of other people's psychological games. This is how you transform from someone who gets played to someone who can't be played. This is how you build a life where respect isn't something you chase, but something you command through the simple act of being unshakable. The choice is yours. You can continue operating without protection, hoping others will treat you well out of basic decency. Or you can build mental armor and make respectful treatment the only viable option for anyone who wants access to your world. Mental armor doesn't just protect you. It transforms you into someone worth protecting. And once you become that person, you'll wonder how you ever lived without it.